that I have never stolen a dollar from. I didn't rob my mother.
Let's talk about steroids, Lenny, because you talk about it in the book.
I actually took steroids, as crazy as it sounds.
He's racist. That's what former teammate Ron Darling claimed about Lenny Dykstra in his 2019 book. Darling wrote that during Game 3 of the 1986 World Series, Dykstra unleashed what he called the worst racist insults he had ever heard. The target was Boston Red Sox pitcher Dennis Oil Can Boyd. Darling described it as foul, hateful stuff, worse than what Jackie Robinson faced in his early baseball years. But here's where things get interesting. Dykstra didn't just let this claim slide. He took Darling to court, filing a lawsuit for defamation. He wanted to clear his name and make Darling pay for what he saw as lies. The case went before a New York judge, and what happened next became a legal moment that defined Dykstra's entire public image. The court threw out his lawsuit. Why? Because the judge ruled that Dykstra was what's called a libel-proof plaintiff. In simple terms, his reputation was already so damaged by his own criminal record that nothing Darling said could make it worse. The judge pointed to Dykstra's time in prison for drug possession and grand theft auto, his house arrest for bankruptcy fraud, and his general reputation for bad behavior and bigotry. The court decided his character was already so tarnished that new accusations couldn't hurt him any further. This wasn't just a legal loss. It was a public declaration that Dykstra's own actions had destroyed his reputation beyond repair. Now, before we continue, think about this. If you've ever wondered what happens when someone's past catches up with them in the worst possible way, this story is a perfect example. And if you're finding this as wild as we are, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What do you think about the judge's decision? Was it fair? Or did Dykstra deserve his day in court? Let us know. The story with Ron Darling wasn't just about words in a book. Darling stood by every word he wrote. He said there was no chance he misremembered what happened that day in 1986. He heard what he heard, and he put it in the book for a reason. Darling also called Dykstra one of baseball's all-time thugs and a criminal in every sense. He explained that while Dykstra's crimes during his playing days were mostly personal, his behavior later turned truly criminal. When Darling's book came out, Dykstra reacted with immediate anger. He publicly threatened physical confrontation if he ever ran into Darling. This wasn't a quiet disagreement between old teammates. It became a hostile, public fight that kept getting bigger. The legal battle itself revealed just how high the bar is for public figures trying to win defamation cases. Dykstra wasn't just facing the libel-proof doctrine. He also had to prove something called actual malice. This is a legal standard that comes from a famous Supreme Court case. It means Dykstra needed to show that Darling and the publishers knew the racist insult story was false, or that they published it with reckless disregard for the truth. That's an incredibly tough thing to prove. Dykstra's lawyers argued that Darling should have been on notice that the story might be false. Their reasoning was that Darling himself admitted in the book that the 1986 television broadcast didn't capture Dykstra yelling those specific racist words at Boyd. Dykstra's legal team called this purposeful avoidance of the truth. They claimed Darling knew he couldn't prove it happened, but published the story anyway. The court didn't buy it. The judge found that Dykstra failed to provide enough facts to show actual malice. This meant that even if the libel-proof doctrine hadn't applied, Dykstra still would have lost the case. The legal system gave strong protection to Darling and the publishers, reinforcing the idea that memoir writers have significant freedom when writing about controversial public figures. There was even another claim in the lawsuit that got dismissed. Dykstra sued for something called intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is a legal claim you can make when someone's behavior is so outrageous that it causes you severe emotional harm. The court ruled this claim was just a repeat of the defamation claim. More importantly, the judge said that what Darling and the publishers did was not outrageous by any stretch of the imagination. Think about what that means. The court was saying that writing about Dykstra's behavior in a memoir, even with serious accusations, was perfectly reasonable, given who Dykstra was and what he had done. The court essentially confirmed that Dykstra's own reputation made him fair game for this kind of commentary. Dennis Oil Can Boyd played a strange role in all of this. At first, Boyd said he didn't hear the racist insults that were supposedly directed at him during that intense World Series game. But later, Boyd changed his stance. He publicly stated that he believes Darling's account of what happened. This shift is important. Boyd's later belief suggests that Dykstra's decades decades of bad behavior gave him enough reason to think the accusation was true, even if he didn't hear the words himself in 1986. Dykstra's documented history of hostile and criminal actions made the claim believable to the person who was supposedly the victim. This evolution in Boyd's perspective shows how someone's pattern of behavior over time can validate accusations from their past. Boyd didn't need to remember hearing the words anymore. He just needed to look at who Dykstra became. But the Ron Darling lawsuit is just one piece of a much bigger picture. Dykstra's feuds didn't stop with his former Mets teammate. They spread across the baseball world and beyond, creating a pattern of conflict that the court would eventually use against him. In 2015, Dykstra and former Philadelphia Phillies teammate Mitch Williams were supposed to be honored at a sports roast. These events are meant to be funny, even if the jokes get rough, but this one turned ugly fast.
Williams made jokes about Dykstra's inability to win the MVP award. Dykstra fired back by insulting Williams and then made a comment about how Williams made him take more drugs. The exchange kept escalating. Then Williams delivered the knockout punch. He said he had 5 kids and never stole a dollar from any of them, and that he didn't rob his mother. This was a direct shot at Dykstra's criminal past, specifically his financial crimes. Dykstra immediately tried to change the subject, suggesting they keep things focused on baseball, but it was too late. Williams had reminded everyone in the room and everyone watching that Dykstra's criminal history wasn't just old news. It was a permanent stain that his peers would never let him forget. What made the Williams incident so revealing was Dykstra's reaction. He wanted to move past the personal attacks and keep things about baseball. This showed that even Dykstra understood his criminal record was indefensible. When confronted with the reality of what he had done, stealing from his own family, he had no comeback. He could only try to change the subject. This moment at the roast became a public display of how Dykstra's past follows him everywhere. His former teammates don't forget, the audience doesn't forget, and most importantly, the legal system doesn't forget. Every public appearance became another opportunity for someone to bring up his crimes, and Dykstra had no way to escape it. Then there's Dale Murphy. Murphy is a Hall of Famer, known for being one of the most respected and clean-cut players in baseball history. In 2020, during nationwide protests after the murder of George Floyd, Murphy's son Max was seriously injured. Max was peacefully protesting in Denver when police shot him in the eye with a rubber bullet. Murphy shared this painful family moment publicly, expressing his concern and heartbreak over what happened to his son. Dykstra's response was shockingly vulgar. He went on Twitter and launched a nasty attack against Murphy and his injured son. This wasn't a disagreement about politics or protests. It was a personal, cruel attack on a father during one of the most difficult moments of his life. Dykstra showed no boundaries and no restraint. He was willing to use a family's trauma and a national tragedy as an opportunity to lash out. This incident became another example of what the court called his unsportsmanlike conduct. It showed that Dykstra's behavior wasn't limited to his playing days or even to baseball. He carried his hostility into every corner of his public life. The Murphy incident also highlighted how social media became a weapon for Dykstra. Twitter gave him instant access to a wide audience without any filter or editorial oversight. He could attack anyone, anytime without thinking about consequences. The platform amplified his worst instincts. Where he might have once needed to make a phone call or write a letter, now he could fire off an attack in seconds. This immediacy meant his confrontational style reached new levels of intensity. The attack on Murphy and his son showed Dykstra's willingness to exploit sensitive political and social issues for personal conflict. He wasn't just arguing about baseball or old grudges. He was diving into the most painful current events and using them to hurt people. This pattern of behavior contributed to the court's assessment that his reputation included bigotry and unsportsmanlike conduct. After losing the defamation lawsuit, most people would step back and accept the court's decision. Not Dykstra. Instead, he doubled down with even more extreme claims. He publicly accused Ron Darling of faking his cancer diagnosis. Think about that for a second. Darling had documented medical issues, and Dykstra decided to claim it was all fake. This wasn't just an insult, it was an attack on someone's health and integrity at the deepest level. But Dykstra didn't stop there. He dragged in Jeff and Fred Wilpon, the former owners of the New York Mets. He claimed the Wilpon family was in on it, suggesting a conspiracy to destroy his reputation and support Darling's so-called lies. These accusations had no basis in fact. There was no evidence, no proof, nothing to back them up. It was pure retaliation after a legal defeat. By bringing the Wilpons into his story, Dykstra was trying to reframe everything. He wanted people to believe that his criminal record and bad reputation weren't the result of his own actions. Instead, he suggested it was all part of a plot by powerful people in baseball to bring him down. This kind of thinking is common for people who refuse to take responsibility for their behavior. They create elaborate stories to avoid facing the truth. The conspiracy theory approach revealed something important about Dykstra's mindset. He couldn't accept that his own choices led to his downfall. The idea that he brought this all on himself was too much to bear. So he constructed an alternate reality where he was the victim of a coordinated attack by wealthy team owners and former teammates. This narrative allowed him to maintain his sense of righteousness, even after a court had legally declared his reputation beyond repair. The Wilpon allegations were particularly baseless. These were successful businessmen who had no reason to involve themselves in a dispute between two former players. But in Dykstra's version of events, they were puppet masters, pulling strings behind the scenes. This kind of thinking only reinforced the public perception that Dykstra lacked judgment and restraint. The problem for Dykstra is that the truth was already documented. The court had access to his entire history: prison time for drug possession and grand theft auto, house arrest for bankruptcy fraud, public fights with teammates, attacks on families during national tragedies, bizarre conspiracy theories. All of it added up to a reputation that was beyond repair. The judge's ruling wasn't just about one accusation in one book. It was about a lifetime of choices that led to a legal status that very few people achieve. Being labeled a libel-proof plaintiff means the law recognizes that your reputation is so damaged that no one can hurt it any further. It's a legal shield for those who write about you, not a protection for you. What makes Dykstra's case particularly notable is how comprehensive the court's assessment was. The judge didn't just point to one or two incidents. The ruling referenced his entire pattern of behavior spanning decades. His criminal convictions were matters of public record. His time in prison wasn't disputed. His bankruptcy fraud was proven in court. His public conflicts were documented in media reports and social media posts. The judge had a mountain of evidence showing that Dykstra's reputation for misconduct was well established long before Darling's book came out. This is what made the libel-proof doctrine apply so clearly. The court could point to specific, verifiable facts about Dykstra's life that supported the conclusion that his reputation couldn't be damaged further. The legal precedent set by this case matters for anyone writing memoirs or books about controversial figures. The ruling confirmed that authors and publishers have strong protections when writing about people with extensive criminal records and documented patterns of bad behavior. As long as the characterizations are consistent with the person's proven history, defamation claims will struggle to succeed. This is especially true when the person suing is already known publicly for the exact types of behavior described in the book. Dykstra's case became a textbook example of how someone's own actions can eliminate their ability to sue for damage to their reputation. Lenny Dykstra's story is a cautionary tale about how your actions define your legacy. He was once a celebrated baseball player, known for his aggressive style on the field. Fans loved his energy. Teammates respected his competitiveness. But all of that is overshadowed now by decades of bad decisions. His feuds with Ron Darling, Dennis Oil Can Boyd, Mitch Williams, Dale Murphy, and the Wilpon family are just the public highlights of a much longer list of controversies. Each conflict added another layer to a reputation that eventually became legally indestructible in the worst possible way. The court's decision confirmed what many already believed. Dykstra's notoriety now eclipses his athletic achievements. He's no longer remembered for his time in the World Series or his contributions to championship teams. Instead, he's known as a figure of continuous conflict, someone whose post-baseball life became defined by hostility, crime, and retaliation. So what's the takeaway here? Dykstra's legal battle and the libel-proof ruling show how the law treats people whose own actions create their reputation. You can't sue for defamation if your documented history already proves you're exactly what people say you are. Dykstra's criminal convictions, public fights, and cruel attacks gave the court everything it needed to dismiss his case. His own behavior became the evidence against him, and even after losing in court, he continued the same pattern, making wild accusations and refusing to accept responsibility. That's the legacy he built for himself. Every choice he made, from the racist insults allegedly hurled at Boyd to the conspiracy theories about the Wilpons, contributed to a reputation that became his prison. Not a physical prison like the one he served time in, but a reputational prison that he can never escape. The law recognized this reality and codified it in a court ruling that will follow him forever. If this story got you thinking, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment. Do you think someone's past should define them forever?
Or should people get a chance to rebuild their reputation? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the controversies that shaped sports history. Lenny Dykstra went from baseball star to cautionary tale, and his story isn't over yet.